Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you and welcome to the school committee meeting on Monday, September 13th, 2021. This is your notice that this meeting is being electronically recorded. We're going to start our business agenda tonight with Principal Rooney to introduce us to our new Student Advisory Council reps.
Thank you very much, Chairman Withers, and I'd like to extend our appreciation to the committee for having the SAC representatives back. That was certainly one of the things that was very disappointing about the ways that you all had to operate during the COVID conditions, and I realize we're still working our way through things with masks and stuff like that, but very, very proud and pleased to be back. And I have two outstanding members of our senior class to introduce you to tonight. I'll talk about their individual bios in just a second, but to my immediate left is Maya Allo, and to her left is Katarina Trieb. And what really impresses me the most about these two young ladies is that they have been volunteering in our Attleboro community since before they even started at Attleboro High School. Whether it was through their church or the Attleboro Arts Museum, giving back to their community has been something that's been a passion of theirs and been a part of their family ideals since before they got here. And I don't think it's any I don't think it's any strange connection that now that they've been here and that spirit of volunteerism has been fostered even more, that they've developed into outstanding young leaders. Maya is the vice president of Girl Up. She is a member of the Student Ambassadors. She is one of the coordinators for our very successful Project Unite group, which runs the Special Olympics each year. No surprise, as a volunteer at the Attleboro Arts Museum, she's a member of the Art Club. And she is one of our Skills USA members as a graphics design student. And correct me if I'm wrong, you worked here for us during the summer for graphic design. Great. So, just another great opportunity for our CTE students to get that relevant experience as an employee of the district this year. And again, as I mentioned, she's been volunteering at Attleboro Arts Museum since she was 13 years old. And she also volunteers at the Old Town Church in North Attleboro. And what little bit of free time she has, she does like to dance. Katarina is a student leader as well as a student athlete. She's been in the Student Ambassadors. She's also in Project Unite, Student Council, and the Leo Club. And she's also taken leadership roles. She is the treasurer and acting president of Student Council. She is the senior representative to the Leo Club and serves as a volunteer services coordinator for Project Unite. In addition, she's been a lead ambassador and community outreach liaison with the AHS ambassadors. And for the Student Advisory Council, she is a regional communications coordinator. As I mentioned, she's an athlete. She participates in both winter track and spring track. And she also volunteers at the Old Town Church and has helped us in the past to plan Blue Pride Night, Blue Steam Ahead, as well as freshman orientation. So I'm very proud to introduce them to you tonight, and I think that they will do an outstanding job to represent all of our students pre-K through 12 plus this year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maya and Katarina, welcome. We're very happy to have you here. We're very happy to have our Student Advisory Council in general back with us and our around Attleboro Public Schools updates that we've missed for the last year and a half. So very excited to have you both, and we look forward to working with you. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Agreed.
And you guys are next on the agenda, so if you want to take it from there.
So, our SAC shoutouts we have no SAC shoutouts this week, but we'll be using this section to celebrate all student successes in the future. So elementary schools, all elementary schools are hosting Welcome Back Nights on September 30th. Families are welcome to come and meet their students' teachers to see their kids and see what they have been working on. Will is having a PTO meeting and a movie night on September 17th at 6 p.m. The PTO meetings are a great place for parents to come and be involved in the community. Will is also having their book fair through September 27th to October 1st. Students can buy books, posters, and other cool school supplies there. Next, we have the middle schools. All the middle schools are hosting back-to-school nights on September 29th. This is the perfect time for families to get to know all their students' teachers and get a sense of what the students' day-to-day schedule looks like. Coelho is having a virtual PTO meeting on September 15th at 6:30 p.m. This is a great opportunity for parents or guardians to get involved in the school community. Coelho is also having their picture day on September 20th, and Wamsuta's picture day is September 27th.
So, for our high school, back to school night is happening on September 22nd at 6 p.m. and it's a great opportunity for parents to meet their students' teachers and walk along their students' schedules. Picture Day is happening on September 22nd and 23rd for our high school, and it's a great opportunity for students to dress up because their picture will be in the yearbook. Senior Planning Night is happening on September 23rd at 6 p.m. in the Bray Auditorium, and it's a great place for students and families to go get any questions answered regarding the college application process. And lastly, the SAT exam is happening on October 2nd, and I highly recommend that all students get to school early so they don't have to rush to find a parking spot or check in. And lastly, for community engagement, the Attleboro School Store's new website is now open, and it's a great place for you to buy Attleboro apparel and Blue Pride merchandise. And you can visit the school's website at ahsschoolstore.com. And this concludes our segment on All Around Attleboro for this week.
Great, thank you both very much. Anyone have any questions or comments for our new Student Advisory Council representatives?
Great job.
Thank you.
Again, thank you very much. It's really exciting to have you here with us and have the Student Advisory Council back involved as we try and return to some sort of normalcy. It's always a good part to keep us and the community aware of what's going on. So we look forward to the reports and working with you over the rest of the year. Thank you both.
We're happy to be here too.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we have our superintendent's report. Mr. Sawyer.
Thank you, Chairman. Tonight we'll be mostly focused on our experience with reopening the district. As I've reported to you on my Friday updates, we're very pleased that we had we would call relatively smooth opening. As Mr. Furtado will get into some detail, there were certainly some transportation issues, as there always are, and I would just remind us all that this is a consequence of when people forget to register or move into the district late, don't have that opportunity to register on time. That causes a lot of anxiety with people wanting to get on the bus. So as a result, rather than taking a very strict approach of saying, nope, the paperwork hasn't processed, we're going to drive by your child, the practice here is that we work with families, and we certainly have a lot of people on the bus who haven't registered in the first couple of weeks, and that causes quite a bit of delays and things for the transportation department work through. Again, Mr. Furtado can get into greater detail, but this is a choice we make, and I think that it's a small price for us to pay to go through a couple weeks of headaches and delays to be accommodating to families and to put getting kids to school safely ahead of other more mundane concerns. But certainly this year, and that's an annual thing, and I stand by that decision. But this year in particular, I think that the forces at work were greater than normal, and that's particularly why we're still working through some transportation stuff that, again, Mr. Furtado will be talking about. But other than that, I think things were quite smooth. Ms. Regan and I have been touring the district, and we both, I would say, agree that it's been a pleasure to see how excited and happy students are to be back in the classroom, and that while not everything is back to complete normal, of course, as we're all wearing masks in this room, there are things that haven't returned yet that we look forward to someday getting to. But there is a marked difference between this year and last year. Starting the year without having to deal with hybrid or anything like that has helped us to get off to a strong start. And the removing of distancing concerns has resulted in being able to group students in a way that's more familiar to us as educators, and going around the school and seeing teachers engaged in what looks like more typical lessons to us has been very encouraging, and we're pleased to see that our message that we need to reset and get back to what we do best, which is teaching kids, has been embraced, and we really feel like we're off to a good start. I do have a couple updates before I turn it over to my team to get into the particulars about their part of the opening. One, I owe you an update on the assistant principal at Thatcher. As you're aware, Dr. Tench resigned in July. We went through a process and had a replacement that we identified and hired. Unfortunately, she worked 2 days and then was offered a job as a principal. And we lost her. And at this time, we really do not believe that there is an appropriate match to hire as an assistant principal for Thatcher going into the school year. So it's time for us to get creative and think of other ways to support the building, because it's our strong feeling that in many ways, just putting somebody in a position that isn't a good fit causes more problems than it does good. So we have to find other ways to ensure that the administration at Thatcher has everything they need to be able to do their jobs. Certainly we've been giving them a lot of extra help right now, and I'm hoping to have more information for you later this week on exactly what it's going to look like in detail. But I did want to let you know that that's a position that at this time we've decided we're not going to fill with an assistant principal. I'll pause there to see if there are any questions.
Mr. DiMaggi?
Yeah, that was surprising. And probably because I missed the July meeting that I didn't know that piece. But at what point is that for the entire year? Is there a certain point in time where you may think it might be appropriate to revisit?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. At this time, though, based on what's available and
Sure, everyone's starting the school year. It's
it's not a good time to be hiring.
Right.
And Thatcher's a very special building that has very particular needs that you really need the right person for.
That's the concern that I would have, just given that what Thatcher typically, what's at Thatcher every year, and the type of services offered. So.
Yep. Okay, I wanted to update the committee and the community on our testing program. As we mentioned previously, the state announced to us this summer that they were switching to one vendor. Last year, I think there were at least 3, if not 4 vendors that the state were using. So now they're all down to one. It's CIC Health, which was recognized in many circles as having, done the best job for whatever that means. I'll just speak for Concentric, who we worked with. They were good partners. We had a good relationship with them. We felt like they were very attentive, and we didn't have any issues with them, but the state decided to go with CIC. I have been, as I've talked about in your updates, it's been a real source of frustration that the decision to do this has left the district with a gap in service, because starting after August, they wouldn't let us work with Concentric anymore. That contract had ceased, but they have not yet put us in place where we can actually return to testing. And I just can't say enough that testing is one of the important components of how we keep buildings open, safe, and kids in school under a pandemic. It's a non-invasive cotton swab that you'd have to take once a week. And by doing that, it gives us good real-time information about what's happening. I will remind us all that until we started testing last March, there were all kinds of assumptions about how prevalent the virus was in our schools. And many people said that one of the reasons why we shouldn't do testing is that when we see how many positive cases, we're not going to be able to keep the schools open. Well, that turned out not to be true, right? The number of pools in a given week was very, very manageable, and it helped us to realize that there was a lot less asymptomatic cases in the schools than had been assumed previously. So good information like that helps us to make good decisions about what is and is not safe. And, there's a lot of concerns now about breakthrough transmissions, and it would be really, really helpful in this moment as we try to reopen school under these new conditions to see whether or not we have more cases than we realize. So, again, it's a point of frustration that the state has taken so long. But as way of progress, they haven't named our partner to get our testing program off the ground, which is Norton Staffing. So they provide healthcare workers who are going to come in and help us with our testing program. We've met with our partners at Norton. They seem up to the task and seem to know what they're doing, so we're optimistic. While we're waiting for our, what they now call routine testing to begin, which is scheduled to start September 27th, we are currently doing symptomatic testing and test and stay. So symptomatic testing simply means that when someone in the building goes to the nurse's office and has COVID symptoms, if they have provided consent, we can test them on the spot and decide with a rapid test whether or not they test positive, in which case they should schedule a PCR immediately, or whether they test negative and it's just a cold or allergies or whatever it is. And it's a real relief for families to know in that moment that it's not what they fear it might be. The fact that we can provide that information is really, really helpful to families, and it's really helpful to schools, because then we don't have to worry about whether or not, when that person finally does take a test, if they take a test, and sometimes they don't, it just leaves a lot of those questions unanswered. And then test and stay is the program by which, if people are deemed close contacts, they can participate in test and stay and get tested with a rapid test every day for it's a 7-day period. 5 of those days are in school. So, for a period of time, you're getting tested with us on a daily basis. And as long as you test negative, you get to stay in school. And so that really reduces the impact of being a close contact. I know that some families have objected to test and stay because they see it as coercive. They're complaining that this is an incentive created to participate in testing, and the answer to that is yes, that is exactly what the state's doing. And given that we're talking about testing and not other things, I think it's a perfectly reasonable thing, and I hope that families will consider it, because while some people haven't provided consent, when we call up and say your child is a close contact, would you like to give your consent so that we can test them and keep them in school? It's amazing how many people suddenly are on board with that idea. So we're hoping that the word's going to get out, and as people see that by participating in testing they can keep their kids in school, that we'll have a higher participation rate. But at this time, our rates are low, that we have not reached even the 50% mark that we did last year. So this week we're going to be really pushing through social media to get families in place so that we can have a good number of people testing on the 27th. So that's my testing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you answered my first question, which was, at what rate do we have families opting in?
It's about a third right now.
Okay. And then, so my second question is, you just mentioned, so when you're calling to say, would you like to do the test and stay?
Yep.
Is that a permanent consent, or is that just for that one instance?
No, we're treating it like they're giving us consent. We're taking the consent over the phone, and then we're following up and doing the paperwork to back that up. It's basically an act of trust on our part, but again, the whole idea here is to keep children in schools. And so, we're taking a little bit of liberty, but we think that that's what works best for us.
And there's no deadline to opt in for testing?
Never.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Storrs?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just trying to recall, when was it that the state told us that they were changing the vendor? Approximately, was it?
End of July?
Was it?
It was late summer.
It might have even been early August. It was right around that time.
It just, the fact that we're going to miss a full month of school.
Yeah, it's outrageous.
In a process that was working last year, that was enabling us to be reactionary to prevent a breakout or widespread issues. For the state to make this change midsummer, and here we are going to have a full month of school without this, they dropped the ball.
Yes.
I mean, I can't say it enough. The state has dropped the ball once again when it comes to COVID. So has nothing to do with Attleboro. You're doing the right things. It's just sad that they made these decisions that are going to negatively impact us.
Yeah, I mean, not that they care what I think, but the real mistake here was that they should have let us continue working with Concentric until CIC had their act together.
Absolutely.
And that they didn't was an unnecessary error on their part.
Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. Mr. Sawyer, could you explain a little more about the relationship between CIC and Norton Staffing?
So CIC, as I understand it, is actually doing the testing, right?
Okay.
But they are connecting districts with various health staffing organizations. So there are a number of them across the state. And so based on where you are and based on the size of your need, they're partnering different people with different organizations. We're way outside of my realm of expertise here, but I'm led to believe that Norton is one of the better ones, and that our size was one of the bigger testing districts was a factor in us getting a good one, because I've been hearing horror stories of some of the smaller companies when they really went to go do what they were being asked to do and they realized that it was beyond the scale of what they could accomplish. They've just walked away from districts. So then they have to restart the whole process again. And thankfully, that's not happening here. Norton has been a good partner, and I want to be very clear, they're not the problem either at this point.
I'm glad to hear we have a good relationship. One other question, you said that we're targeting the week of the 27th?
Yes.
Is that, so I guess from what you said earlier, not all districts are necessarily starting on the 27th.
No,
Because
different
of the-
districts are in different places.
Okay.
Some districts, so it was a buffet menu, those 3 programs. So you have symptomatic testing is one program, test and stay is a second program, and then routine testing is the third. Districts were allowed to match any of them that they wanted to. So there are some districts that have already begun all their programs because they just picked symptomatic and test and stay, and they're not doing the routine testing. The routine testing is the most labor intensive. That's the one that has the biggest commitment. And we're a big district and we're doing that, and that's part of what's slowed down is because there's a labor shortage, as I'm sure you're all aware, and finding healthcare workers is proving to be very, very difficult.
Well, thank you for all of your work and doing what you can to close that window, that we don't have that extra level of mitigation. Because as we know, the more levels we have, the safer our community
Absolutely.
can stay. So, thank you.
Okay, last one. I'm going to end with a touchy subject, which is vaccinations. I wanted the committee to be aware that DESE has explicitly recommended to districts to consider implementing a vaccine mandate for employees. Again, employees. The MTA voted this summer to recommend that districts do a vaccine mandate for employees. We've reached out to our local labor unions to talk to them about if that's their stance as well. We're in the preliminary stages of that, and of course, the news on, was it Friday, that at the federal level, there's a mandate being put in place that I believe affects us, but I have not received word from the state. So I'm waiting to hear the details on the state's stance, because that's what we'll, regardless of what we read about in the paper, in the end, my recommendation to you will be to do what DESE and the state tells us to do, which we have not heard yet. But there's nothing to decide this evening, but I just wanted to put it on your radar that it's conceivable that we're either going to be forced to do something here or going to have to make a decision about whether or not we want to follow recommendations on that. And that's something that, we're gearing up to get to a place where we can ask you to make a decision if there's a decision to be had, which again, it's not even really clear to me which situation we're in. And I know that Ms. Singer will be talking a little bit about our vaccination rates as part of her report this evening.
So that's something we need to collectively bargain, I assume, so.
Correct.
That process.
Well, unless it's a mandate, right?
Right, if the state mandates it, we won't, but if the state, it tells us what they want us
Just
to
be
do
clear,
and then makes us make the decision.
we will be sitting
on it.
down with our bargaining units regardless of whether it's a mandate
Okay.
or not, but it does certainly change it if we're asking them to do it versus we're being forced to do it.
So that process has started, setting up meetings with the union?
I would say that we've opened discussions.
Has there been any statements or scuttlebutt from DESE about vaccine mandates for students 12 and over?
Not that I have read.
Mrs. Dorse?
I know we're not there yet, but simple question would be, if we do go that route, down the road, wherever that is, weeks from now, would you recommend that we take on liability if there's employees who request that liability agreement?
I'm not sure I understand.
Many companies right now who are requiring it, the employers are going, I will get it, but you have to sign a liability document saying that they take on the responsibility, because as we know, under emergency use, it's not. So I'm asking if you would actually recommend that if we go this route.
So I would ask them not to answer it, because I think it would go into collective bargaining with the union at that point. And if we have to collectively bargain, and we'll probably have to collectively bargain part of it.
I can see that question being more of a legal issue. I'm not sure about the.
Well, I mean, it's something that'll come up in discussion, so I would prefer.
That's fine, I just wanted
The
to.
good news is I can't possibly answer it because I'm not prepared to, so.
Fair enough.
All
Okay.
right. Any other comments or questions? No.
That concludes my report. At this time, I'll turn it over to Ms. Regan to give hers.
Thank you, Superintendent Sawyer. So to start us off tonight, I'd like to first talk about registration. So this year was our first full implementation of the Aspen online registration system, and I really want to take a moment to thank everyone that participated in that full implementation. It was quite a lift, but I think that having families or giving families the opportunity to register from their home device at home and upload documents or email documents was something that helped to make that transition very smooth, especially with COVID right now. Families were also given the opportunity to come into the building to use a kiosk that we had set up so that they could register online with support, and then also they could drop off documents if they weren't able to upload them or email them or what have you. And, you know, as with any new full system implementation, there were a couple kinks. We're still working them out and have already made some real-time adjustments throughout this summer and the beginning of the first few weeks. So we're hopeful that we'll continue to work on that this year. So in looking at total numbers, this year through the summer and early fall, we've registered about 227 new students. There were approximately 74 at the elementary level, and I'm saying these numbers approximately because I'm sure, you know, from the moment I took them in the middle of the day today, there's been new students that have come on. Middle school was at about 64, and the high school is about 89. So we have, go ahead, Mr. Geddes.
Sorry. When you say 227 new, is that new from last year or new from the district ever? Like, does that include students that may have gone to another school because of our COVID policies and is coming back, or is that just all new, never been to Attleboro Public Schools before?
So I don't have all of that
Okay.
that detailed information, but these are brand new registrations as far as we're concerned, and so they had to upload all the new documents and everything.
So any returning students would have been included in that number?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
That includes all kindergartners?
The kindergartner, no, it doesn't include
Okay.
kindergartners. We have 416 kindergartners right now. So that number did come up from last year.
What was the number last year, do you remember?
It was closer to about 350. This year, well, actually last spring, we also gave our teachers the opportunity to select about 40 different professional development options for August 26th and also for November 2nd. So topics ranged around curriculum and instruction, special education, and then we also had specific offerings for our support personnel. So that includes Title I and our ELL staff and then other paraprofessional staff. All of our educators, everyone in the district also engaged in a 2-hour session on trauma-informed or trauma-based classrooms. And when Ms. DePalma presents in a little bit, she'll be able to provide more detailed information about that. And as far as our support staff for this year, Ms. Singer will share more information about this in her update, but through the use of our ESSER funds, we were able to hire about 15 one-year paraprofessionals at the elementary level. So for last week, they helped us to welcome all of our new kindergartners. That was quite a feat. And then also, they are in the process of being trained in some of our reading assessments and then given some strategies and tools to support our reading programs and interventions for some of our students that need some support in the early stages because of some of the unfinished learning that they had from COVID. So that is currently my update right now. Any questions?
Mr. Geddes?
With those 15 paras, is there optimism that we might be able to retain at least some of them after this year, or do we want to wait, or should I wait for Ms. Singer to for that question?
Right now, currently, we're using them with the ESSER funds, and
Okay.
so, you know, when it all will depend on the funding that we have looking ahead, and based upon our budget formulas, and we'll have to wait and see, but I don't want to answer that right now.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Thank you, Ms. Regan.
Next up is Miss Medeiros.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So I'm going to start with our summer programming. So for our extended school year, we had about 280 students who participated this summer. That's about what we've been averaging over the last few years. We had 80 plus staff. I want to thank our staff, our students, and our families for overall a successful summer program, particularly when we had a lot of our typical staff that usually work for us needed a break. So we had a lot of outside staff and staff that don't typically work our summer programs. We also this year did something a little different with our network program. We offered a 3-week session right before school started in August to transition a small core group of students back into the network, our most intensive program. So that was a little bit new for us, and again, some success. They did some enrichment, some transition work, and also some academics. As far as just to follow up on Ms. Regan's with our move-ins, of all of those students that have are new students here, about 60 of them have IEPs. That's from pre-K through 12 plus. And that's up from our typical number. We usually range mid-30s to mid-40s for move-ins. But we are at, I just checked, we're actually over 60. We just got a few this afternoon from when I checked. That includes out-of-district students as well. We've had 3 of those. Then, like Ms. Regan stated, we've used some grant funding this year to add some much-needed positions at the secondary level. One of those is a 1-year BCBA position. So over the last few years, we've had 1 BCBA doing grades 5 through 12, including the network. We added a middle school BCBA, so now we have a BCBA who offers for special ed programming and also for behavioral supports and consult for staff at the middle level, and then 1 at the high school level. We also added some BCBA supports at the network program. We have an increasing number of enrollment in special ed at the high school, particularly in grades 9 and 10 over the last couple of years. And with that said, we've added, used some of the grant funding and done some moving around, and added 3 positions at the high school, 2 at Attleboro High, specific for inclusion supports, something that we've really been working towards offering supports in our classrooms versus doing all pull-out services. So we added 2 positions there, 2 teacher positions, and then we added 1 at the network program. So the past staffing, we could only service 21 students. Now with the additional teacher, we can service up to 28. And while we don't have a lot of kids in the out-of-district who would transition into that program, we are planning that we're seeing needs at grades 9 through 12 in district who could possibly transition to the network in preparation instead of sending them out of district. And then my last update is really regarding for our families. Our ACE PAC is holding a virtual meeting tomorrow, a planning meeting at 6 p.m. It's online. Check out their social media on Facebook. The Zoom link is there for families who are interested and staff who's interested or any community member. They're looking to plan some topics for meetings for this school year. So that concludes my update, and I don't know if you have any questions for me.
Any questions for Ms. Medeiros? Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yep.
Great. So I think our next update is Ms. Single? No, I'm sorry, Mr. Palmer.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Mr. Palmer.
This is my first official update as Director of Social Emotional Learning. So I'm both excited and a little nervous. That's okay. To begin with, I just want to follow up on what Ms. Regan was sharing earlier about the professional development that was offered to our staff and administrators. That's how we opened our year. All of our staff and administrators received professional development from the Riverside Trauma Center and Federation for Children regarding understanding trauma, and then also trauma-sensitive schools. During that, they received a plethora of strategies and good conversation about what to do when, which was greatly appreciated by everybody. They spoke of being understanding, providing structure, continuity, recognizing trauma reactions, self-care, which is very important throughout that, along with strategies and information about when additional supports are needed. The number one question I've been receiving this year is, what is social emotional learning and what will I be doing for the year? So that's a question I've been answering quite a bit. So just to kind of give you my definition of social emotional learning and what I'll be working on this year is really, it's a process through which children or adults acquire and effectively use their knowledge and their skills to understand and manage their emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. Currently, I've begun my work with getting to know the schools and seeing what they're doing. I'm very familiar with Studley. Now I need to kind of go back out there and get familiar with staff and our current administrators and what they're providing and what they're working on and what they're working with right now. And that's been a main focus of what I've been doing, and really sitting down and talking to people about where we're at and trying to see where they need my help and also how we need to align. With that comes a few different things, because there's a lot of pieces that are connected to the social emotional learning world that can enhance it, really. Attendance kind of falls in that arena, providing supports to our families to get our kids to school. The registration process, which I'm slowly kind of getting transferred over to me to be able to streamline, but also make it efficient and make sure that we know what we need to know for our kids. Overall communication is core to it, both for our schools, but for our families, but for our administrators, everybody involved. The cleaner we are in our communication, the easier it is for everybody. Supporting all of our principals, especially our new ones, and helping them through in any way that I can, because part of it is caring for all of our staff as well and making sure that we're all in a good place to do what we need to do. Aiding our students and families to navigate a variety of challenges, connecting our families to supports within the district, building our community connections, which we have quite a few of, but now kind of connecting them all and helping them work together. And moving forward, developing the new Welcome Center that'll be based out of the high school once we open, and making sure that that's the hub for all of our families to not only feel welcome to the district, but also receive the information and supports that they need in a centralized location. At this time, I'm really focused again on building that knowledge of what's going on so that I can help align and bring together the work that's being done throughout the district and make it stronger and kind of more in depth. And I have to thank everyone in the central office and all my peers, but also all the staff here who have helped me adjust to moving over to here and finding everything I needed to find, but also making it an important part of the daily work and really being a part of conversations. And in that's it really is where my heart lives. So I'm very excited about this work, and I think some of you who know me know that. And I really believe that we can continue to do amazing things, and we're only going to get better moving forward. So I'm looking forward to where we're headed. Questions?
Thank you. So I have a question related to the first thing that you said, because I think suddenly over the last several months, professional development has become kind of a hot topic.
Sure.
On what is being taught in professional development. So can you just discuss a little bit about the trauma aspects you were talking about at first, what that is, what they're being educated on, and what the hopeful outcome is?
Yeah. Well, when you talk about the trauma-sensitive training, or you talk about there's a multitude of ways that trauma can impact or be kind of looked at. Trauma can be anywhere from students moving to a new home to more significant situations regarding violence or domestic violence or COVID in general. It impacted their daily lives. It was something that cause something to shift significantly in their world. And the needing to adjust to that is what trauma-sensitive training is about. It's how do you recognize a trauma reaction? How do you respond to that? That's the training that was received at the beginning of this year for all of the staff and all the administrators. Did that help?
Very much. Thank you. Any other questions, Mr. Domenici?
Thank you, and just kind of tying it, first off, welcome aboard. I know we've done this, but it's good to actually have you in place. I was curious if there were some early kind of returns on specifically impacts, social emotional learning impacts as a result of kids coming back into the schools on a full-time basis. I mean, we hear about the positives, but we also know that there's a lot of folks that are still concerned.
Right.
So has there been kind of, it's too early to call it an uptick, but has there been kind of an awareness and a focus there specifically? Has there been some early returns where we can see that this is working?
Very much so. I mean, I think before we opened, when we spoke to our leadership team, we spoke about the importance of communication and how remaining connected to our families and helping our students come back into the building, but not only our students, but our staff who hadn't been in the building. We needed to be very mindful of how they were coming in and recognize that they were coming in stressed, and their anxiety levels were a little higher than they typically would in any other normal year. And then how do you address that? And I, for one, learned very quickly at the end of last year when I had a teacher coming back to Studley was I needed to take the time to really talk it through with her and understand where she was coming from and her perspective, because I had gotten to experience it through the year. I got to see things work. I was able to be part of seeing all those, oh, look at that, spacing works, masks work, I was able to see that actually happen. She didn't have that, ability. She was working from home, so we had to talk it through, and we had to really just, speak specifically to what was causing any of her stressors at that time. And because of that conversation, she was able to oh, all right, now I understand. This is the why behind what we were doing, and this is how it worked, and this is what the results were, and this is the data to show how successful it was. And that was very important for her. Kids were, teaching them or being mindful of, now that we don't have that necessarily 6 feet separation anymore. Now how do you function together again? How do you make that work and not be in each other's space? So those conversations happen too, and our adjustment counselors are well aware of that, and that's a very much a focus to them. I know all the administrators that I've spoken to, we've talked of that as well, and also just again getting used to being around more and more people. That was an adjustment.
Thank you. It'd be good to get updates, throughout the year on how we're doing and where the focus is going, given that this is kind of all new. So I'm certainly interested, whether it's here or in our subcommittee meeting for teaching and learning. So thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
I think next up is Julie.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hello.
All right, so it has been an extremely busy hiring year, as you can imagine. As previously mentioned by my colleagues, we were able to add positions with our ESSER funds, which is indicative of the increase in positions hired this year compared to last year. I will say that we are in a much better position than a lot of districts that colleagues of mine in the HR world have been talking about their struggles right now, still trying to find people. And so we are in a much better position than they are. And I can't thank our staff and our administration enough for how they've handled their hiring this year. So over the past several years, the HR Council has worked to increase our awareness and improve our hiring practices. And as you'll hear, our work has made an impact in a staff makeup that is more reflective of our student population. And again, I just want to thank our administrators and the staff in the buildings that participated in our screening committees and our hiring committees. They did all the work on this, and it really paid off this year. So I want to thank them. So currently we have 826 staff in the district. That does not include coaches, substitutes. That's regular staff. We have 64 active subs in this district, along with 10 building subs as well. So to date, we have hired 69 staff. In typical years, it's in the 40s somewhere. So again, that increase is indicative of the positions that my colleagues spoke to earlier, paras, BCBAs, special ed positions. There are still 8 positions in process of being, or people in the process of being onboarded, and we still have 8 vacant positions open. So as far as breaking that down a little bit more, we hired 37 teachers thus far this year. We have 1 teacher vacancy still open, but of that 37, 27% of our teacher hires this year were persons of color. And then as we move into our para positions, we've hired 28 paras this year, still with 4 vacancies currently. Of the 28 paras, 18% of those were persons of color. So again, I want to thank our administration and our staff for really doing a great job with hiring this year, with the amount of hires that we had. As far as vaccinations go, we did survey 772 staff at the beginning of the year before everybody returned on whether or not they were vaccinated. We had a 68% response rate from that survey, of which 94% of persons who responded were vaccinated fully. So it's indicative of a high percentage vaccination rate among our staff. So as Superintendent Sawyer indicated earlier, we're not sure what's coming down the pike, but we will certainly be engaging our union colleagues in any discussion around vaccine mandates moving forward. And that concludes my report. Does anybody have any questions?
Sorry, what was the percentage of staff that responded?
68%.
68%, thank you.
Mr. Larson?
Good evening, Ms. Singer.
Good evening.
At some point, I don't expect you to have the number here, but could you provide us, I'm concerned and curious all at the same time, the amount of staff that we have that we're currently using the ESSER or some version of
Yes.
the many different versions of ESSER to fund.
Okay. I do not have that exact
No, I
at this
didn't.
moment, but I will certainly.
Didn't expect you that you would, so.
Okay.
It would be good for us to know.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else?
Anybody else?
Just a quick
Mr.
one.
Stewart?
So, you and I have talked about it before, and having diverse staff, I think, is important, needs to be statistically representative of our student population, of our city. So I think the work is great. And I just, having seen some of the recent twisting of things when it comes to other issues related, I just wanted to put it to rest that we're not going out of our way just to hire somebody, and I already know the answer, I just want to put it out there that we're not just hiring this person over this person for a single reason, but when they are equal, there's opportunities to meet those statistical, you know where I'm going with this, if you can speak to that, please.
Yeah, we did not put hiring practices in place for a specific reason other than to look at the best practice in hiring, right? And to do that, you create a larger screening pool to have more eyes with different perspectives looking at a candidate pool. And those were the things that we've been changing over the last several years that have really paid off this year.
I was just looking to prevent misinformation from getting out there before.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Ms. Singer.
Thank you. I'll now turn it over to the gentleman you've all been waiting for.
Wow.
No pressure. Always.
Mr. Furtado?
Good evening. I'm gonna start with transportation because it was mentioned by the superintendent, and it continues to be a kind of a day-to-day issue for the district. Before I rain on Mr. Larson's parade when he's going to report out on finance, but so we have experienced late applications that are now above 600, which is probably something around
20 a day, 7 days a week since the application deadline passed. We are genuinely overwhelmed with the numbers. It's almost 3 times the norm. The frustration comes because we want children on a bus. I don't know how many times we've said transportation is the safest way to get your student to school. But we simply can't and aren't staffed to deal with that level of urgency. So I'm sure you're all hearing from people. I have heard from many of you on this topic. I want to assure you that we are doing everything we can, but the numbers are just pretty overwhelming at this point. Moving on from that, operationally, our staffs had an immense amount of work to do. It was kind of funny. From the time the pandemic started, we did a lot of physical changing to the buildings to accommodate a bunch of stuff. And then some of those regulations melted away, and we had to reconfigure the buildings in a very short period of time to accommodate a new school year, which we worked right through the first week of school, but got all of that work done. And I'm very, very proud of the staff that participated in doing that. We have gone over, as we did last year, the HVAC systems prior to the opening of school, all of the air quality issues that we are concerned with to make sure that the schools are safe from a pandemic perspective. We have reinstituted, which you will vote on tonight, our extra cleaning services in the third shift. And as some of you may have seen, we have new disinfecting robots that are used typically in hospital settings that allow us to completely disinfect areas that may have had exposure to the virus and assure that everything in that area has been mitigated. So as we were last year, we continue to be very, very confident about the steps taken and the capabilities we have in-house to address the health and welfare of our students and staff. Finally, we distributed 6,000 Chromebooks in a matter of a couple of weeks, which was the first time in this district's history that something like that was done. We're very, very happy about that. And we'll be, in a very short period of time, implementing a ticketing system to track the repair needs for that body of equipment out there. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Mr. Geddes. Going back to the transportation, I know at the start of the year it was folks that were late needed to wait 2 weeks before they were to find out if they were going to be on a bus and what bus that would be. Are we now operating on 2 weeks from a registration comes in, or is it now that we're 2 weeks into school?
This week we're addressing registrations that came in between August 31st and September 3rd.
So it's still about a 2 week.
Yeah.
About a 2 week
Yeah.
time period. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Storrs?
I know that we talked about it during the last meeting. I just wanted to verify. So, of the students who are outside of the distance, but are within the opt for service, how many, if any, have been denied transportation?
We haven't denied anybody. We have run into a situation where 2 of our buses so far completely filled up. So we had to reconfigure the routes and accommodate some other people. We have not said no yet. We have a situation in South Attleboro that may ultimately require us to add a bus, and we are working on that this week and probably next week.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else?
more of a general question, not so much for Mr. Furtado, but pre-COVID, we were looking at a lot of different initiatives within the district. And in the spirit of getting back to normalcy, where do those initiatives stand in terms of potentially looking at redistricting, potentially reconfiguring schools? This is kind of a hope for me that we can really get back to what this body and the administration is here to do. But
it's a hope we share. We need to prioritize. Some things probably are more urgent than others. One of those things that got dropped in the pandemic was the creation of the next strategic plan.
Right.
Right. So we have a long list of things that we need to get back to. And as soon as we work our way through not only the opening, but all the other sort of logistical challenges that they keep throwing at us, that our hope is that we'll be able to get to it soon.
Thank you.
Mr. Domenici?
Thank you. I did have a question, but I wasn't sure whether to wait for your subcommittee or not. I'll just ask it now, and if there's an answer there, we can table. Yvonne had mentioned about some additional special needs coming in, after school started. And it wasn't that long ago that we had an influx to the point where we had a concern with the budget. So are we kind of back at like normal expectations right now? Like we knew there would be a few and we're there? Or is that going to be an update that I should wait for?
Yeah, so we have initiated a bi-weekly meeting with the budget office in the city to kind of discuss budgetary items and concerns and things on the horizon. I think for the next 36 months, we're going to have some flexibility with federal dollars related to COVID funding, ESSER funds. That'll help us mitigate some of those peaks and some of those unexpected items that come down the pike. I think that the question about the maintenance of some of the personnel is going to be very difficult in terms of being an ability to be consumed by the budget. The budget is not strong right now, and that's a function of, as you know, the state funding formula kind of not working out well, and the city has obligated to make sure we sort of stay whole, but the actual numbers will not be pretty for a while.
Okay.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you, Mr. Furtado, for now. I know you're coming back up in a minute.
I will be.
You feel free to stay.
Yeah, you might as well just stay right there.
All right. Anything else, Mrs. Sawyer?
No, that concludes my report. Thank you.
All right. Next on our agenda, we have our minutes from our August 16th, 2021 meeting. I'm going to table this item till our next meeting. There are still some edits and revisions that need to be made. As we all recall, it was quite a lengthy meeting with several motions and amendments to amendments and whatnot. So we will table this and take it up at the next meeting. Consent agenda, consent items, 6 items I'll read off, and then we'll consider them as a whole. Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $50 from Target to the Attleboro High School gifts donation line. Motion to accept a payment in the amount of $3.75 from Bay State Textiles to Hill Roberts. Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $600 from West Ed to be deposited in the Coelho gifts donation line for educational needs. Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $200 from West Ed to be deposited in the Wamsutta gifts donation lines for educational needs. Motion to accept the donation of 24 backpacks with school supplies with an estimated value of $600 from Cape and Park Dental to the Attleboro Public Schools for children in need. Motion to accept the donation of school supplies from the Attleboro Moose Lodge for children in need with an estimated value of $400.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. All right, next we have a subcommittee report, and for that I'll turn it over to Mr. Larson for Finance and Budget.
Thank you. Finance and Budget Subcommittee met September 8th. We have 2 motions to bring forward that I'll get to in a couple moments. Mr. Furtado touched on some of this as we went through the monthly budget update. talking about closing last year and opening this year. As far as closing last year, with a lot of the different grants and funding the way it was, we ended the year with approximately $1.8 million that was returned to the city. That money we're hoping to get back in the fall because our budget is about $2 million short, so from being funded. So using that money, the $1.8 million, once it gets certified in early November, it's the understanding of the schools that we'll get that money back from the city to cover most of the $2 million shortfall that we have in the budget. So as Mr. Furtado stated, he and the city have been meeting, and there is a plan that's in the works to cover the entire $2 million, but at this point, we're not ready to bring that forward. We've had a good start, as he said, to the beginning of the school year, so there's really not a lot of highlights in the budget reports because we've really just been back to school for about a month and a half. We had an MSBA update. It was very good news in a lot of fronts. The high school project continues to go well and is on budget. The new roofs that were installed at Brennan and Wamsutta held up very well through their first hurricane. So that was great. Always good news to, it's always good to hear the new roof dealt with a hurricane well. So that's always good. We asked Mr. Furtado about the gym floors at Hyman Fine and Hill Roberts, and we were informed that that's no longer a school building authority project. That's now a city building authority project. So we're waiting for an update from the city on the status of those two projects. We had an update on fee for service, and Mr. Furtado just told us about that. And the two motions we have coming forward have to do with prior year invoices and to the extended cleaning that was spoken about earlier for the 21-22 school year. So before I get to those two, are there any questions on any of the other topics? All right, seeing none. So the first motion, motion to approve and recommend to the full committee to send to the municipal council for approval of prior year invoices in the amount of $10,968.32 as defined in the September 3rd memorandum from the finance director to the mayor's office.
So moved. Second.
You were all given copies of the invoices that were to be paid. Seeing no questions, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Second motion is in response to the additional cleaning. So, motion in response to COVID-19 and the increased demand for additional custodial support. The city has requested 8 3/4 additional full-time employees to be hired. The time period for the service covered by this amendment is September 7th, 2021 through June 30th, 2022. The total fee for service during this foregoing time period shall be $289,551.82. In consideration for the foregoing, Sodexo shall invoice the city on a monthly basis after services are provided, and payment shall be due upon receipt invoices thereof.
So moved. Second.
This is basically just a continuation of the services that we've been receiving going forward for the new school year. Mr. Chairman.
So forgive me, I mean, I'm not an expert in this, but I'm just curious on what the rationale is for this, given that by all intents and purposes, COVID is now believed to be strictly aerosol and through the air and not pass through surfaces. So why, I don't think I've ever questioned the city wanting to give us money before. I'm really confused as
Yeah,
what
a couple
the
of points of clarification.
I'm going to defer to Mr. Furtado for your answer.
Yeah. This is being funded through federal grant dollars, not through budgetary or operational dollars, either on our part or the city's part. Secondly, the custodians have an unusual demand still during the day for doing stuff, especially in situations if there's a student or a staff member who does not feel well, or those sorts of things, lunch periods. So there's an additional demand on their time during the day that is certainly needed. And this group is coming in again on third shift to make sure, do cleaning and make sure that whatever cleaning has been done by everybody else is on point. And in some senses, it's an insurance policy. It's making up for time that gets lost during the day for other reasons. And I think from a district perspective, it provides staff and students with a sort of sense of security that otherwise wouldn't be there.
I would just add that as we head into cold and flu season, it's not just about COVID, right?
Yeah.
Part of helping to keep kids in school is not to have confusion about what symptoms mean, and we accomplish that by, trying to combat those illnesses as much as anything else. And I do believe that clean surfaces help in that regard.
You might have just won me over.
Mr. Storrs.
So I'm not opposed to this at all, but as a follow-up question, the almost $300,000, if science indicated we didn't need to spend it on this, I'm not saying it does say that, I'm saying would we be able to utilize those dollars for other purposes?
Yes. Yep. The short answer is yes. However, again, because of the proximity to schools being closed, it's dealing with what will be gaps in ability to properly clean buildings because of all the other things that are being done during the day. That would be a challenge to mitigate without this.
And just to further qualify your yes, it could be used for...
Mr. Geddes, do you have a...
Sorry. I apologize, Mr. Larson. Just to qualify the yes answer, the money could be used for other things COVID-related under the ESSER fund requirements, not
Correct.
just,
Yeah.
we can't throw it at new staff or anything
No.
like that. Yeah.
Right.
Would the funds, the $289,000 approximately be able to be used by the school department for COVID-related issues, or by the city, and the city could hypothetically elect to spend it somewhere else?
Yep. So the funding here specifically is from a school awarded COVID grant. We have, again, over the next 36 months, approximately $8 million.
It's the administration's position that this is the best use of those funds?
Certainly is mine, yeah.
Any other questions? No? Okay. All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, that's the end of my report.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Next, we have open forum. Open forum is the time where members of the public may address the school committee. Open forum is not a time for committee members to engage in dialogue with members of the public. We are interested in what you have to say, but we cannot respond without background information. If you would like to address the committee at open forum, please come forward and state your name and address. All right, looks like we have no one for open forum today. Anyone else have any, so I'll close open forum, excuse me. Any other business anyone has tonight? All right, there being none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.